Hi everyone, back for another day of the Explorer Unit. I wanted to review a little bit though before we started into our chapter today called Spanish Settlements. So before we start into Spanish settlements, let's talk about the Native Americans, who lived on the island that Christopher Columbus first got to and named Hispaniola after his homeland of Spain. Well, not his homeland, but the land, the country that sponsored him. What were those natives called? Do you remember? They were the Taino. Which continent were the people from who were looking for a better way to get to the East Indies to obtain spices, since the route through the Middle East was so long and dangerous? Which continent? Think of the name of our unit, Europe, the European explorers. Who sponsored, speaking of Christopher Columbus, who sponsored Christopher Columbus's voyage? Remember our Isa. So King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. And in what year did Christopher Columbus sail that ocean blue and change the world? That was 1492. Who was trained as a knight and spent years fighting against the Moors in southern Spain? Then he joined Columbus on his second voyage, and he went searching for the mythical fountain of youth. That was Juan Ponce de Leon. Who was the explorer who traded for pearls with the Lady of Copicheque and then had Vitichuco as a prisoner and was among the first Europeans to see the Mississippi River? That was Hernando de Soto. Who was the conquistador who Hernando de Soto helped to conquer the Inca Empire in South America? He took the Incas as slaves and conquered them when they became sick with European diseases. That was Francisco Pizarro. And who was the explorer that we just talked about, who went searching for the 7 cities of Cibola after Friar Marcos announced that he had seen them? Remember, Esteban had sent the huge cross back. Then that was Francisco Coronado. So today we're going to talk about the Spanish settlements. And you're going to hear about a change in the way the explorers began to view North America. Initially, the explorers were, remember, looking for that shorter, faster route to get to the East Indies. Then they became interested in exploring the land for riches. But they always intended to return to the countries where they were sailing from. In today's Read Aloud, you're going to hear about how the explorers changed from that to beginning to want to establish settlements, okay? This change in motivation occurred because of the changes taking place in Europe. Europe was overcrowded and it was lacking in resources. So settling in the New World was a way to gain access to more space and new and better resources. You're going to hear the word settlement. So a settlement is a place where people have set up a community where they intend to live from there on out and become permanent. You're going to hear about settlements that were established in North America by Spanish explorers, okay? So yeah, let's just jump in and get going. So the expeditions of De Soto and Coronado indicated that the great age of the conquistadors, remember the Spanish word for conqueror, was coming to an end. Both men had set out hoping to find fabulous riches and to outdo the achievements of Cortez and Pizarro. Both the expeditions of De Soto and Coronado ended unsuccessfully. Remember, we've learned that prefix un meaning not. Both found little gold, and De Soto didn't even make it home. Coronado did, but he came home beaten down and demoralized, having lost the large investment that he had put into the expedition hoping to find wealth. The Spaniards decided that there was no gold to be found in the parts of North America mainland De Soto and Coronado had explored. They decided to focus most of their attention on the colonies they had established further south, in the Caribbean, in Mexico, and in South America. However, they did not forget about the rest of North America entirely. They established a few forts to protect their colonies, and they sent some missionaries to convert or change the Native Americans over to Christianity. In the 1560s, the French had begun exploring the eastern coast of Florida. They set up a fort named Fort Caroline. Some men from the fort became pirates. They started attacking Spanish ships sailing in the Caribbean. The Spanish decided they needed to build their own fort along the coast of Florida for several reasons. The French had a settlement in the area, and the Spanish did not want competition in this part of North America from another country. Mostly, though, the Spanish wanted to establish a fort to protect their ships. They sent a man by the name of Pedro Menendez de Avilés to set up a fort. He arrived in the August of 1565 and found a safe harbor where a river flowed into the Atlantic Ocean. His men set up a fort which they named St. Augustine, after a Christian saint. Soon after, the Spanish decided to attack the French fort, catching the French off guard and defeating them. The French fort, Fort Caroline, was renamed San Mateo after the Spanish had captured it. St. Augustine, Florida was established in 1565, 20 years before the English settlement on Roanoke Island and 42 years before Jamestown settlement. There have been people living there ever since. So, and this is important, guys, St. Augustine is the oldest continuously inhabited European settlement in the continental United States. The Spanish also sent missionaries who worked to convert the native people to Christianity. The missionaries set up a community called missions. Pedro Menendez was an important influence in having missionaries brought to North America. As the first Spanish colonial governor in Florida, Menendez insisted that any ships coming from Spain should include a priest who would serve as a missionary. The Spanish set up a number of missions in the 1570s in Florida and on the islands off the coast of what is today the state of Georgia. Spanish missions were also established in Mexico near the border of what we now know as the United States. A few decades later, in the 1590s, the Spanish began establishing missions in the Southwest in what we know as the states of New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. In the 1700s, the Spanish built a string of missions along the Pacific coast of California. The Spanish did this not only to convert the natives to Christianity, but also to develop allies among the converted people in North America. Many American cities in the Southwest began as missions named after Christian saints. Some examples include San Diego, San Francisco, San Jose, and Santa Barbara in California, and San Antonio in Texas. Every mission was centered around a church. Churches were made of either stone masonry or adobe, which is clay bricks. Depending on their location, missionaries could often live in one building, and the converted natives would live within the mission in their own homes, which were also made of stone or the adobe clay bricks. Most missions included farms and orchards. The natives were taught to grow crops like corn, wheat, and barley using European farming techniques. Some natives were also taught crafts such as carpentry, woodworking, weaving, soap making, and candle making. Depending on the area, some missions also raised livestock, including cattle and sheep, on cattle ranches located just outside the mission. Most missions had bakeries, craft shops, and storerooms for the crops grown on the farms and orchards. Many missions also had tailors, carpenters, and blacksmiths. In the missions, the native people attended a school where they received instruction from priests who included religious teachings. They were taught about Christianity and the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. They learned to say Christian prayers. A typical day in a mission usually involved religious classes and religious services. Usually adults and older siblings would work in the mission farms and orchards, while the younger children were taught to read, write, and speak in Spanish, not their native languages. Some missionaries and conquistadors shared some similarities, but also had some differences. Most missionaries were not trying to conquer the people using force. Some were, however, trying to defeat the natives' way of life and promote Christianity and European way of living. This meant some missionaries were trying to extinguish or get rid of the natives' traditional religion, culture, and language. Some European missionaries thought removing their way of life would be helpful to the natives. Similar to conquistadors, some of the missionaries made slaves of the Native Americans and put them to work on farms. Many local native populations also suffered the same fate as those who first encountered Christopher Columbus. Many became infected and died of diseases to which many of the Spanish had become immune. Some Native Americans accepted Christianity and lived on local missions. Many others did not like being forced to adopt the new European way of life and Christian religion. They wanted to keep their language, their religion, and their traditional ways of life. Eventually, some of these native people rebelled against the missions in the area. In 1680, a Native American from a Pueblo tribe called the Pope successfully led a rebellion that evicted the Spanish from their pueblos, temporarily restoring their traditional way of life. Once they regained control of their pueblos, they extinguished or got rid of the Spanish culture and Christian religion and restored their native customs. About a decade after Pope's death, however, the Spanish returned and reconquered the land. When the United States expanded to the south and west, it took over Spanish territory in Florida and the southwest. Most of the Spanish missions were abandoned when Spanish lands came under control of the government of the United States, but a few of them still operate today, and many can still be visited. If you live in the Southwest or can travel there, you can visit an historic mission for yourself. Okay, guys, talk to you later. Bye.